But hello to everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the show and tell for the Wellcome Data Prize in Mental Health. We're really excited to have you all here. I'm Michael Crowder. I'm an analyst at Social Finance. We've been working with Wellcome to design and deliver the Data Prize. And for those who haven't heard of Social Finance before, we're a non-profit organisation that helps ambitious organisations and communities deliver pioneering solutions for lasting social change. And in particular, our data and digital work brings together expertise in data science, product development, user research, co-production and strategy consultancy. And we do that across the health, social and wider public sectors. So the way today will work is we're going to start with a quick introduction to both the prize itself and the show and tell before launching into our presentations. But before that, a little bit of housekeeping. So as I've noted, we're recording the session, but for any attendees of the webinar, you won't be featured on that, but just good to be aware, and we will circulate the recording once today's event is finished with anybody who signed up to the Eventbrite link. We have two boxes for you to sort of express thoughts. We have a chat button and we'll be monitoring the chat throughout. We also have a dedicated question and answer button that should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll explain that a little bit in detail about how that's going to be used a little bit later. But any questions you have for the teams, please put them in there as a first port of call. I'm also joined by my colleague Juliette, and I'm going to hand over to her now to give some background information to the Data Prize and introduce herself. Over to you, Juliette.
Thank you, Michael, and hi, everyone. So my name is Juliette Néran, and I'm the project manager at Social Finance, working on the Data Prize. And before we get started with a presentation from Tim, we thought it'd be useful to start with giving a little bit of background on the Wellcome Mental Health Data Prize. So in case you're not familiar with the term, data prizes are open competition or challenges where participants are using data to solve a societal problem. And so with that context in mind, the Wellcome Data Prize in Mental Health is supporting multidisciplinary team to explore existing data in order to research into anxiety and depression in young people and generate tangible output in order to support the mental health research community. And the aim and the overarching question of this data prize is to help understand what are the active ingredients that make a difference in preventing, treating, and managing anxiety and depression in young people, and understand what works, for whom, in what context, and why. In terms of the work that the teams participating to the prize are producing, so teams are exploring the data, and one thing that they need to do is like answer their research question and produce some, find some new insights on the active ingredients. And in addition to doing that, teams participating to the prize are also building a digital tool that will enable future research in the field. To tell you a little bit more about the structure of the Wellcome Mental Health Data Prize, so it's organized in 3 phases. Each of the phase in the prize is 6 months long, and there are different levels of funding and support for teams on offer for each of these phases. And only a subset of the teams is progressing from one phase to the other. And in total, throughout the prize, there is £1.4 million that is being awarded throughout the 3 phases. So yeah, so this phase is basically showing what I just said, but to give you so a bit of background, so the discovery phase, which is the first phase of the prize, started in autumn 2022. And during this first phase of the prize, so we had 11 teams, and the focus during this first phase was really for teams to explore the data set, focus on the research question, and finding insights. And now, where we are now, so we are in the second phase of the prize, which is called the prototyping phase, and we are midway through this phase. And during this phase, so 5 teams have been selected, and the focus of this phase is really now for the team to develop and build their prototype of digital tool And that's what the team are going to be giving us a flavor of later on. And finally, so at the end of this prototyping phase, there is going to be 3 winning teams that are going to progress to the last phase of the prize, which is the sustainability phase. And during this phase, these 3 teams are going to be receiving additional funding and support in order to sustain and scale their tool. So that's it, really, to give a bit of a snapshot and background on the prize. And I'll now hand back to Michael, who is going to walk us through the structure of a show and tell for today.
Thanks, Juliette. So the show and tell is fairly self-explanatory. It's partially about telling, about providing a narrative where the research has taken them and the activities that teams are currently doing. But it's also about showing, so providing real examples, illustrations, and demonstrations. We have 5 teams, and we're going to be doing this across 2 lunch times. So we have 3 teams today, and tomorrow at 12, we'll see the final 2 teams as well, focusing on developing these prototype digital tools. And this is very much in line with sort of agile methodology, which we've been promoting throughout this phase. The idea is, rather than work on a tool and then when it's finished, show the world, the idea is to show ongoing work, prototypes as they're being built, to get early learning and feedback on them and help to iterate and improve them constantly. So today, teams will be looking to share their progress, communicate their learning, and also perhaps reflect on the challenges they faced along the way. They'll be asking for feedback and input from their audience, and they'll be disseminating some of their work to date, albeit in a prototype form. So each team today is going to get a 15-minute slot to present their work, and we're going to follow that by a dedicated question and answer session for 10 minutes. So what we would heartily encourage our audience to do today is to post questions in the dedicated question box at the bottom of your Zoom. Throughout the talks, as they come to you, we will be monitoring that throughout. And at the end of each presentation, we're going to choose a selection of those questions that have come through the process, and we'll be posing them to teams. And there's a possibility that some of our teams might also want to ask questions of each other as well. As I say, we also have a chat function, which is less for questions, perhaps more for comments as well. And I'd encourage anyone to introduce themselves and their organization that they come from today, if you'd so like to. In terms of the agenda for today, we're having this kickoff now. We're going to first have a talk from a project around Tidal, a digital tool to implement developmental analyses of longitudinal data. That project is led by Dr. Heather Wally at the University of Edinburgh, and today we have Alex and Amelia here to present that. After a break, we're going to move into a presentation from Dr. Aja Murray at the University of Edinburgh about developing a counterfactual analysis digital tool to illuminate active ingredients in mental health. And then following our final break, we have a presentation on Harmony, which is a global platform for contextual harmonization, translation, and cooperation in mental health research. And that will be led by Dr. Owen McElroy at Ulster University. We'll finally come back from that to a wrap up. We'll have a quick feedback link and any final questions about the day. So without further ado, I'm going to pass to Alex and Amelia to start our first presentation on Tidal.
Well, thanks very much. So it's Heather Wally here from the University of Edinburgh. So yeah, it's really nice to be here, and we're all huddled together the same screen. So I shall just very quickly pass over to Alex and Amelia to take us through.
Okay, hello. Thanks for joining. We're just going to share the screen now. That's not one. Can you all see the slides? Cool, let's crack on then. So thanks very much for joining. So what is Tidal? So as Michael said, it's the tool to implement developmental analysis of longitudinal data. And what we've done is we've built this tool to facilitate a user-friendly tool for trajectory modeling. And what we want to do is take you literally from raw data, which might be captured through Excel or some sort of text file where you've just got one row per person and a bunch of different columns. And what we wanted to do is take you from this kind of rawest data to some complex analysis that can be done from trajectory modeling, which we think is a really important feature of longitudinal modeling. And the reason why we developed this tool is that this kind of analysis is quite tricky. It can be quite difficult to interpret and understand. And we believe there should be no barriers to examining this longitudinal data, and that this kind of tool would be really useful for people who have this kind of data but don't necessarily have the experience in running some of this analysis. So that's why we've designed Tidal. How does Tidal work? So it just uses repeated information from the same people over time, so in a longitudinal framework. And what it does from its very essence is it just takes raw data from in wide format, like in that Excel file I just showed you there, and it converts it to long format just so it's ready for data prep. And then it uses multi-level growth curve modeling to estimate trajectories of a particular trait that you're interested in. And then it's all ready for analysis and exploration. And so what I'll do is I'll just quickly give a background of what we're trying to do, and then the fun stuff Amelia is going to talk you through. If you are interested in seeing this tool in action and you want to have a go of it yourself, there's a QR code here just for scanning if you want to have a look. But we've basically been developing 4 different kinds of versions of Tidal. We have an R package for people who are sort of experienced in R. We have an R Shiny package, which is like a user interface online, so people can upload their own data and explore it without having to use R or statistical languages. We're also working with a software developer to develop a desktop version so you could use it offline, and we're also developing a Stata package as well. So we have aimed Tidal to be for basically for anyone, but mainly it's for researchers without specialist training. It's for clinicians and health professionals who might have access to longitudinal data and might have some interesting insight they want to gain from the results, but don't necessarily have the time or the experience to do that. We've also started aiming it at teachers as well, because there's a lot of ways in which we could use repeated information from pupils to identify potential at-risk pupils or groups of students, and also policymakers as well. So it's a really wide collection of people that we've targeted Tidal at, and we've had lived experience and feedback from these different groups on how to improve the tool as we go forward. So why would you use Tidal? So we've got 3 main functions of this particular project. So what we want to do is we want to introduce the basics of longitudinal modeling for people without necessarily that experience. We want to help interpret some of the complex findings that you might get from trajectory results. You might see your findings and go, oh, what does this even mean? Why are there so many different numbers all going in different directions? Tidal is designed to help you understand your findings. And finally, as Michael said, and Juliet said in the introduction presentation, we want to try to develop this tool that facilitates future research. And hopefully some of the features that we've developed as Tidal will accelerate some of the mental health field forward. So just going back to that, understanding the basics of Tidal, what you might want to do is just take that Excel file, that text file that you've got, and basically just turn it from wide to long. So your data is in wide format as it is, 1 row per person. But actually what you want to do in this particular kind of analysis, you want to move your data into long format. So you want to have repeated assessments within the same person. And what we do within Tidal, we give you the steps of what this kind of analysis is doing. I wouldn't say this is actually analysis, it's just one of data preparation, one of the important stages. And Tidal will do this for you, and you can import all of these, the names from your variables, and then you can change whatever you want them to be later. Amelia's going to talk to you more about that in a second. And then from here, the first step of any kind of longitudinal analysis is just the descriptive statistics, just exploring what your data looks like. And Tidal will do all of this for you automatically. You just input your file, and then from there, you'll be able to see all of this kind of descriptive information, the means, the standard deviations, and then the nice plot of your particular trait over time. In this case, I've called this depression, but it could be height, it could be test scores, it could be weight, it could be anything. From here, you can also then run the sort of statistics behind it, the inferential statistics, and then you kind of get the estimates that you would typically see in a published manuscript. So the kind of things like the age effect. So for every 1 unit increase in age, you might see your trait going up by so much, and we give you the number of people, the number of observations, but importantly, we also give you the model fit as well. So actually, let's say you want to tailor your model to be something a bit more specific, then you can do this in your own, once you've got the basics from Tidal, you can apply this to your own statistics. And then maybe you also want to explore between group differences. So this might be a really important question as part of your research. How do boys and girls differ in their emotional symptoms trajectories over time? And this is the kind of analysis that you can explore with Tidal. And obviously this is just a very brief show and tell, so I won't show you all the features because Amelia is going to do that in a second, but these are the kind of understanding the basics for people that may not have this experience that we can allow them to do. One of the really important things that we've really emphasized is trying to translate complex findings with Tidal. So for instance, you might have a really simple model where you're just assuming a linear model. So you've got an intercept score of 1.62, and then for every year increase in age, depression in this instance is going up by 0.07. That's pretty straightforward to understand. But if you have a more complex model where, for instance, you want to allow for this non-linearity, so you're not assuming that depression is going up at the same rate every year, then actually you might have to add quadratic or cubic polynomial terms. And here it becomes really difficult to interpret what these mean in isolation. So for every year increase, it's going up by 0.1, but then it's also going up, it's also getting faster by 0.1, and then that is changing by minus 0.00. It's all really complicated. So we've added this feature to identify what scores might be at different ages, and you could identify, maybe you're really interested in what the score might be at age 10, for instance, and at age 11, and it will give you the score for that with the surrounding confidence intervals. And maybe you want to see how this differs between boys and girls or a different kind of group. And then finally, we just want to extract some of these meaningful features, potentially meaningful features that have not necessarily been explored within the literature, but could be really helpful. So for instance, we've derived this feature called the area under the curve, which simply plots the proportion of time some group of people might spend with a particular trait. So for instance, girls might spend longer with higher depressive symptoms than boys. And we can zoom in, zoom out of that plot if you're interested in particular key windows. Or maybe we want to identify at-risk pupils or at-risk patients. So maybe you have the overall mean group of all of your students, and maybe you actually want to identify a specific group of students or a specific group of patients, then Tidal will allow you to do this. So that's the nutshell of Tidal. I'll just pass over to Amelia now, who's just going to give you an example through the Shiny demo.
Okay, so in this demo, I'm going to show you how you launch the app from R Studio. So you install the R package and run this function. I'm just going to make it full screen. So once you've loaded up the app, this is the main page that you first see. And we're just going to go through each tab in turn then. So for the data preparation page, I'm just going to show you the synthetic data set as a demo really. So first of all, you select the columns for age. So these are the column names in that file that you've uploaded. So these could be whatever you want to call them. And then we're going to look at SDQ, which is a score of emotional difficulties, and select that for each time point, which corresponds to the age time point there. And then we can have a look at the output, which just shows an example of that long formatted data set now. So once we've got our data in the right format, we can go to the data exploration page. So you could either upload one of those long formatted data sets here, or we can just use what we formatted on the previous page. So here you go through and you select the person, the variable that you want to model the trajectory on. So in this case, it's just called depression, but we could have renamed that. Age and the time point here, and any covariates or confounders, and the model type. So I'll just show linear model for the example here. So you get your descriptive statistics returned, you get a plot of your data, so you can just see how it looks. We can look at the model results. So here it just tells you the formula of the model that's run, a bit of details about that, and then some useful information, hopefully. So number of observations and groups, the fixed effects, and then a bit of text to help people interpret what those results mean. And if we say we add a compounder here, then that would update this and also give you a bit of explanation about what that compounder means as well. But for this example, I'll just run it without. And then some details on random effects. You get a plot of the model. You can look at scores at ages. So this is just another way of looking at the results. So it shows you the score at whatever age you're interested in with some confidence intervals around those estimates. We can look at area under the curve, which is meant to be a representation of the proportion of time with this phenotype. And we can look at different age ranges for this as well. And then once you've done all that and you're kind of happy with your plots, you can download a report. So this is in development, but it's a PDF kind of showing all the results and plots that you've made there. Okay, so once you've done that, you could look at, say you're interested in like males and the difference between males and females, you could look at the interaction effects of this. So we select the variable, so that's the name of the column in your data set, and that returns the results. We're going to add a bit of text for interpretation here as well. And then it's kind of similar to the previous tab. So you can look at the plot, you can look at the scores at ages again, you can look at the differences between these, and yeah, the estimates have confidence intervals around them. And again, you can look at area under the curve. So here we're looking at the difference between males and females, and that shows the difference here. And we're going to try and make this into a nice table and give some more like confidence intervals around those estimates as well. And again, you can select different age ranges. So yeah, so that's one feature. And then another one is to look at individual trajectories. That could be useful for identifying people that might be at risk potentially. So you can look at random samples and kind of see how the data is distributed. You could look at a specific set of individuals if you knew their ID. You could look at a specific variable. So for example, if you wanted to look at males or females, you can look at a random sample of those. And then finally, in the last tab, if I can get to it. So this one is also in development, but we thought it'd be interesting to look at important time points where potentially you might want to intervene or do something. So in this example, we can look at the age where symptoms or those scores are at their maximum, but that's not something we can show for linear models, but the other ones, that does come up. Yeah, I think that's back to the slides. Where they've gone. There we go.
Great. So that's our tool at the moment. As I said, we're trying to redevelop, so we've got different kinds of tools that people could use that might be more beneficial for in different circumstances. And then the future of our tool is that we're just testing it in different cohorts. So we've tested it in 3 UK cohorts at the moment, and then we're also testing it in some foreign cohorts as well, international cohorts, to allow greater user testing. But we're also trying to test different data as well, so clinical, education and policy data as well. And then we're also adding some of these interpretations and training materials so that you could pick up Tidal and start doing analysis, and then take you into further directions where you could, you know, build upon some of the infrastructure that we had there. And as I said, we're adding additional languages as well. So we're currently in the process of writing 2 manuscripts, one very much based upon the research that we've done as part of the tool, and then one are based upon feedback from young people, which was really insightful in the beginning of the first phase. And then we're also trying to get feedback from people to try to understand, from researchers in particular, to try to understand more about the tool and the language that we use around the tool to helping best practice as well. And just a bit of a shameless plug that if you wanted to give us some feedback, we'd really love to hear about it. There's a QR code here just for scanning, and then if you want to give us some input and just have a go of it and give us some feedback, then you get entered into a competition to win one of 10 Amazon vouchers. And the feedback we've got from that's been really important in directing how we shape the tool. That is it from us, and we look forward to hearing about your questions. Thank you very much to different people involved, specifically Wellcome and Social Finance, our lived experience teams, and then the ALSPAC, TEDS and Millennium Cohort participants and study teams, and our co-investigators from the different partners around this award. So look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Fantastic. Thank you, Team Tidal. Really, really interesting and a great demonstration. We have some questions already rolling in, so I'm going to ask them broadly in the order that I think they were asked in. So we have a question firstly from Tanay Katiyar, who asks, does this package allow for the generation of synthetic data that non-specialists could play with? I ask as this becomes important for developing intuitions about longitudinal modelling for such an audience before they begin with real-world data. and could be potentially useful for model validation?
So we haven't specifically added that feature, but it could potentially be something we do add at the end. So if I understand the question is right, is you would run your analysis maybe on real data and then have the option to export that as synthetic data that you could then disseminate for teaching purposes or even for open analysis code for as part of a paper. That could be something we do. It might be easier to just generate synthetic data. If you already have data that you're playing with already, it would be easier to generate synthetic data using things like synthpop, which is an R package. So we're writing something as part of this project which explores about that, but hypothetically we probably could. If there was an appetite for that, then we could probably look to try and include that as a feature.
I think, yeah, and also just to add, the demo data was synthetic data, and we might add some of our own synthetic data sets. So you could always play about with those as well.
We've got one synthetic data set on there at the moment just for playing around, but the plan is in the next few months, we will add 5 or 6 different data sets for different topics, not just necessarily on mental health, but for things like height, weight, these kind of things. Very typical ones that you would learn and explore longitudinal models with.
Thank you. The next question is from Bonnie, who's a lecturer in data science for society at UCL. A question for Team Tidal. Are you running LME4 under the hood to fit the random effect models? If yes, have you thought about how this might scale with larger data sets?
Yes, so we are running LME4, but the plan is to also so one of the things that we're trying to develop is, as part of this tool, is to host it on a virtual machine so that you can upload data onto a secure web server. And behind all of that, we're going to run it. The plan for that will be to run it using MLWin, which is multi-level modeling for Windows, hosted in the Center for Multi-Level Modeling in Bristol. And from there, you would be able to have more complex random effects. And I think that will allow for greater scaling for larger data sets. So I know, for instance, that you can do that for UK Biobank, 500,000 people, and it works pretty well from that. It trips up a little bit in NME4, it trips up a little bit in mixed. But I think the plan would be to do that, long term.
Fantastic. Next question is from an anonymous attendee. How many levels does this tool can this tool handle? Let's say my data has students clustered within schools, which are clustered within regions over time.
Yeah, hypothetically, we could have a cross-classified model, or we could have a 3-level nested model. At the moment, I think we're just going to stick to just having this two levels. I think we just have individuals nested, occasions nested within individuals, because I think any further might be a bit tricky. But the plan would be to have all of this code open access so that you would be able to tailor these kind of models to, those kind of research questions to some of the earlier models that we've designed.
Brilliant. A question from Daria Gaisina. Great work. What about missing data? How are they handled in Tidal?
So missing data was handled by a full information maximum likelihood at the moment, but what we're going to do is we're going to add a feature to allow people to include survey weights. So for handling things like missing data and for handling things like attrition. At the moment, I think it would be too difficult to probably have a feature for imputation. So I think at the moment, we're probably just going to say, just full information maximum likelihood. We do have a function for imputing missing age data in birth cohorts, probably not useful for every kind of research, but if there were other suggestions about what we could do for handling missing data, we'd definitely be interested to hear about it.
Brilliant. The next question, I think, was covered a little bit by presentation, but it's an important one, so maybe worth reiterating, which is from Rosie. Is this currently available to use by researchers?
Yes, so we've got our GitHub page. If you go onto that, it will show you the different options so that you can use the online version and just look at the synthetic data set for now, or you could install this R package and, as I showed in the demo, kind of upload your own data and play about with it that way as well.
I'll just post I'll post a link to our GitHub as well, so that you can, if you are interested, you can follow the link to that.
Fantastic. I was also thinking possibly worth adding the feedback link into the chat.
Oh yes, thank you.
For people as well. because I'm sure we have an active audience who would like to give some feedback.
That'd be great.
And then one final question there for now, which is a two-part question. So I'll ask one of them at a time. Does the package support compatibility with BRMS to support Bayesian analyses?
We tried to do it with BRMS. It's just a bit slow. But again, it's one of these things where if we could, well, when we try to put it onto this remote server on this online server, hopefully it'll be a bit quicker. But yeah, we've definitely tried it with BRMS as well, because we were trying to make sure that the estimates we were getting from LME4, from Mixed for the Stata package, from MLWin, and for BRMS were all giving us very similar estimates. It looks like it does. We have thought about possibly giving a function for changing estimators. At the moment, I think we're just trying to see how much we can push and how much we can push before it starts getting a bit too slow and it gets a bit buggy. But yeah, that's definitely something we thought of. And the second question was, how does the package deal with missing data? Yeah, I think we touched upon that earlier.
Yeah, fantastic. And finally, would the data be secured once uploaded to the app, or who would have access to the data?
So there's two options here. So using the online version at the moment, we're working to make that secure. But if you want to upload your own data, we recommend using it locally. So that means installing the R package and, as I did in the demo, kind of running it from your own computer. Then that's just uploaded to your own computer. But yeah, we hopefully will have an online version where you can upload data securely at some point.
And the desktop version, which can be offline, which will basically look like the Shiny app, but it would just be offline, and you can just download it from a website, and it'll just be a Windows or a Mac executable command.
Perfect. Thank you, Team Tidal, for some very quick Q&A handling of some quite complex questions. Very impressive. We are 1 minute ahead, but I think that's possibly a little bit not enough time to go into some really in-depth questions. So I may give us to a break a little bit early, but thank you so much for your presentation. If there's anything else to pop in the chat, please do. And I think, where should people in the audience go if they have further questions that haven't been covered today?
Yeah, so actually Eileen's just posted in the chat because for some reason I could only post the hosts and panelists. So we've got the online form there, we've got the GitHub, and the GitHub should contain information about where to contact us, but you could contact either one, any of us, and we can post our email addresses and that's the one. Yeah, direct your questions to the unmanned Tidal. We need to make a rota, don't we, of who's manning of which day. But yeah, any questions, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you very much for the really insightful questions. It's really helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Okay, I'm going to lead us into a quick 5-minute break. So we will come back at 12:40 for the next presentation. Thank you. Hi everybody, welcome back. We've hit 12:40, so I'll let everyone drift in for just a second before we get going with our next presentation. Fantastic. I think we can make a start then. So our next presentation, we're handing it to Dr. Arjun Murray from the University of Edinburgh to talk about counterfactual analyses. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen. Hopefully you can see that okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so our oh wait, there we go. So our digital tool is called DigiCat, which stands for Digital Counterfactual Analysis Tool. And the purpose of our tool is basically to facilitate identifying active ingredients in mental health by making counterfactual analysis more accessible to mental health researchers. So I'm talking today on behalf of our team at the University of Edinburgh. And what I'll do is I'll start by just explaining a little bit about why we are pursuing a digital counterfactual analysis tool. So obviously, if you want to identify active ingredients in mental health, the kind of gold standard for that would be some kind of experimental methods, like a randomized controlled trial. But it's not always easy or possible to do a randomized controlled trial. And in those sorts of situations, or even before, going through the very expensive, long process of developing a treatment and trialing it, it's really useful to get some initial evidence on what might be the most promising active ingredients using particularly pre-existing secondary observational data. And there's loads of really good observational data out there that can help give us information about promising active ingredients that I would argue is quite underexploited. However, there is obviously a lot of challenges when it comes to inferring causality and really understanding, well, what are truly active ingredients in mental health when it comes to observational data. And that's because we have issues to do with reverse causality and confounding. So if you take the example of, if you take the example of the effects of social media on mental health, there is an association between social media and mental health, but it's not very clear. Is that because social media has a negative causal impact on mental health? Is it because people who have poorer mental health are more likely to engage more with social media? Or actually, is there no directional association between these two things? And that association that we see in data is really just to do with the fact that there might be third confounding variables impacting both social media use and mental health. So counterfactual analysis can help disentangle these different causal interpretations. Essentially, how it works is you identify pairs of people who have a similar background propensity for experiencing some kind of candidate active ingredient, or what you might call a treatment, but who differ in their actual experience of that treatment. And what you can do is you can then compare those people in terms of their mental health outcomes. And if you see a difference, you can more justifiably attribute that difference to the candidate active ingredient or treatment, as opposed to other potential confounding factors. So from this perspective, counterfactual analysis can be really useful in mental health research, but what we notice is there's quite an underutilization of this suite of methods. And we think that's basically because there's a kind of lack of familiarity and training, and there's a lack of accessible digital tools to implement counterfactual analysis. So what we hope to do is to kind of address that, at the same time addressing the limitations that there are in existing packages and tools that can do counterfactual analysis. So in particular, we note that existing tools, they tend to not necessarily handle very well the features that we see almost ubiquitously in real data. So things like the presence of missing data, complex survey data in like large scale surveys like Millennium Cohort Study, UKHLS, and also for candidate active ingredients or treatments that are non-binary in nature, there's somewhat of a gap as well. So as well as addressing these kind of technical limitations, we want our tool to help with promoting knowledge, uptake, and importantly, principled use of counterfactual analysis within mental health to inform treatment development, to help get more value out of existing data, and to reduce the resources that might be wasted on pursuing active ingredients for treatment development that don't have a true genuine effect on mental health, that might be affected by confounding issues. So our approach to developing the tool has been to make a nice, easy point-and-click interface that's accompanied by accessible tutorials and comprehensive guidance that doesn't assume very much or really any prior knowledge of counterfactual analysis, embedding FAIR principles, which was a big motivating factor for choosing to implement it in R and Shiny. And of course, alongside that, we'll also be making all of our code and materials available, making sure it's all clearly documented and commented, etc. And the whole process as well is informed by potential tool users through a large-scale survey, but also through more intensive user groups, and also lived experience experts, so young people, through a young person advisory set of young person advisory groups. So in terms of the user input so far, so some of the initial findings that we've had from consulting users is that one of the main barriers to using counterfactual analysis seems to be a lack of knowledge. And so that really reinforces for us how much we need to make sure that our tool is very accessible and builds in lots of tutorial material that gives the necessary background to allow people to feel confident and use the methods well. He also said that one of the most important factors for choosing software, and this is a bit related to this, is ease of use. And so that again reinforces that we should be making a very easy to use point and click style tool to reduce the barriers to using it, that doesn't require coding skills necessarily. And in terms of the types of research questions that people told us that they might want to use the tool for, they identified quite a broad range of different potential treatment or candidate active ingredients that they might want to explore, which says to us that we need to make sure that the tool is very flexible in terms of the range of different research questions it can address, and in particular to make sure that it can address treatments that have got different measurement scales, ordinal, continuous and binary treatments. Finally, it seems that potential users are typically already using something like R or GUIs. And so I think that our approach of using it like providing a point and click interface, but having R underlying it, I should say, where people can export the R codes, should hopefully make it easy for people to transition to using the tool. In terms of lived experience expert input, so they've helped us to shape the tool and the dissemination in various different ways. So they have identified potential priority uses of the tool by telling us what factors they think are really important to them in terms of mental health that we should, researchers should be looking into. So things like sleep, relationships, social media use. And that helps inform how we are using the tool for our own analyses, but also the dissemination plan, like which fields of mental health we're going to be particularly promoting the tool to help see it used to answer questions that are important to young people. They've also helped us with the tool content more directly as well. So for example, we're doing an illustrative example of how to use the tool. And based on the feedback from young person advisory groups, we're going to focus on social media use as our illustrative example. And they helped us kind of make sense of the findings there, and will therefore be informing the content of the illustrative example. Going forward, we're going to ask them for some help with getting some quotes and for helping to develop the content that we'll have in the tool that will be about kind of encouraging people to, excuse me, so when they use the tool, encouraging them to get lived experience expert input and their analyses. So we'll ask the young people for their input in helping to shape that content as well. And finally, they're helping us to plan new data collections for data that will ultimately become openly available that researchers can also use the tool with. That's not directly a part of this project, but that was a nice synergy that we identified with this project. So at this point, I will now show you a demo of the tool. Probably don't need to load it like 3 times. So obviously we're going to build out more features, and this is obviously like a kind of demo version, work in progress. But at a basic level, the tool is going to have, obviously do implement counterfactual analysis, and it's also going to have some tutorial content that's going to be linked from the tool in the relevant places, so that people have got lots of accessible background information on the techniques and their implementation in the tool. So people can basically just get started by agreeing to the terms and conditions. And the first step after that is to upload a data set. We're going to provide a sample data set with it as well, so that people can kind of use it for training, learning, practicing counterfactual analysis. Or obviously people can upload a data set as well. So I'll just load the sample data set for now. For speed, it's actually preloaded in terms of the selection of the different variables. But essentially, users could select their outcome variable that they're interested in. So we could look at, for example, anxiety at age 17 as our outcome. Users select their treatment variable from the data that they've uploaded. They would select a range of different matching variables, which would be the sort of confounding factors. And in order to be able to estimate the net effects of a candidate treatment over and above other influences on mental health, they can also select additional covariates that might go into their model as well. Having selected the variables, we can then validate the data, and the app will run some checks to make sure that the data are in keeping with expectations, that they have the features required to be compatible with the tool in these types of statistical analyses. After that, users can choose which counterfactual analysis approach they want to use. We're going to offer about 5 different options. For now, we've just built these 2 options, and today I'll show you propensity matching. So we can choose propensity matching here. The information here dynamically changes according to the different options that people choose, so that depending on which option is selected, users can have information about that option, which helps guide the choice alongside the tutorial materials. So having chosen propensity matching, the next step here would be to choose how we estimate the propensity model. Again, we'll offer various different options. For now, I'll choose probit regression. We have different options as well for missing data, and I'll choose multiple imputation right now. And I will select run to get that to go. So what it's doing now is estimating the propensity model with multiple imputation and probit regression. And once that's estimated, we see some output from that model, which allows us to kind of evaluate that model and decide if we're happy with it. Let's assume we're happy with it. Let's go to the next stage. So after that, once we've got the propensity scores that we need for matching, we then have to match the participants. And we'll offer, again, different options there. I'll choose nearest neighbour matching for the moment, and a matching ratio of 1:1, meaning that each treated unit is going to be matched with 1 control unit. And I'll just run that there. For the output of that, we can see that we've had 503 successful matches, and 476 people haven't been successfully matched. We can then assess the quality of the matches with some graphical output. So here we can see the comparison of the original sample, the treated versus control group, in this sort of orange colour, and then the blue colour is the match sample. And we see, as we would expect, that once we've matched them on propensity, the profiles of covariates, and this is the covariates down here, are much closer to the line that represents 0 difference. We can also look at the specific differences as well. So we can look at the standardized mean difference. And depending on the particular researcher or context, people might set different thresholds for how small they want that to be. But I think we can see here that these differences are all pretty small. So we'd be quite happy with the quality of the matches there. So once we've done the matching, the last step is to do the kind of outcome model analysis, which is the part that will tell us the estimated effect of our active ingredient using the match data. At the moment, we're just offering linear regression for that at the moment, with the possibility to build out other outcome models as well. We can run that, and what we can see here is that for this example, where we're looking at the effects of reading engagement on anxiety, there isn't evidence of a significant effect of reading engagement on mental health based on that p-value there, that non-significant p-value. So that, I think that's quite clear, actually. It's a very large p-value. And then finally, at the end, users will be able to download the R script that generated the analyses and the full report of the results. So let me just go back to the slides. Do I still have a minute? the last, yeah. So the last slide is really just to point out, so we were asked to reflect on challenges. And I think there's two main challenges that we're thinking about at the moment. And one is about the long-term sustainability of the tool. Counterfactual analysis is a very active area of development at the moment, and we want our tool to stay up to date in the long term. We need to think about the financial sustainability of it in the long term as well. So that's one of the key challenges that we're thinking about at the moment. And then the other is about ensuring the good use of the tool. Counterfactual analysis does have a lot of subjectivity. It can be quite technical, so we really want to, as much as possible, be giving people as much information and guidance to make sure that they're using counterfactual analysis well and not making potential errors and introducing potential biases. So yeah, with that, I'll open up to questions. I'll also just say that we are still seeking user input. So if you would be willing to take part in our user survey or user groups, the QR code is there, and you can also email us to be part of that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aja, for a fantastic presentation and demonstration. So just a reminder to any of our audience, please pop your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get through them. But we might be able to start off with a more general question. Towards the end, we're talking about ensuring good use, but also thinking about long-term sustainability. And I wondered, what are your sort of hopes or visions for this tool in 5 years' time, either the impact it's having or what it's doing or its place in academia?
So I think there's a lot of different research questions that could be answered with the tool, with counterfactual analysis. I think there's a lot of potential active ingredients that might be of interest for thinking about as like treatment targets and stuff like that. So I think it's got really wide applicability to the mental health field. So our goal is to really promote it quite widely within mental health, to kind of to see it used in like a wide range of research questions. But we also note that it's quite a general technique as well. So we also would really like to see it used beyond mental health too, because we think that these kind of barriers that we see in the mental health field to using counterfactual analysis also exist in other fields, adjacent fields too. So I think our ambition is to really see it very widely used. And we would really like to kind of keep very up to date with the developments that are happening in counterfactual analysis, and some of that is stuff that we're working on in our team as well. So to see it being a very dynamic tool that is updated quite regularly to keep it at the sort of cutting edge of these techniques.
Brilliant, thank you. We have a question in the chat from Daria, who says, thanks, fantastic tool. I'm interested in learning more. Are you going to offer training workshops anytime soon?
Offering training is something that we would like to do, and we kind of like to do that also partly as part of our user consultation process. So we would like to also get sort of user feedback on the training that we develop. So what we're hoping is that people who take part in our user group would also be offered some training and be able to give us a bit of feedback on that as well. We haven't, don't think we've got details of that advertised. We're basically just asking people to get in touch if they're interested. I think we'll probably more widely advertise details of that once it's like confirmed as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And then a second question, another plug for the tool, such a great tool. Would the data be secured once uploaded to the app?
So yeah, so the tool wouldn't actually store any data, and kind of like the team before us, we would also ultimately develop a version of it that can be used locally so that there wouldn't be a need to upload the data, because we appreciate that like many researchers might be using it within like a safe haven or something like that. So that's something that we'll also do in time, as well as develop a version that can be used locally.
Brilliant, thank you. also like to take this chance to ask if any of our other panelists or presenters have any question about the DigiCap tool.
Not really about the tool, but I was wondering, Aja, if you had any reflections and on potential like learnings or challenges of working in a multidisciplinary team on this project.
I think so. Yeah, it's interesting because we were asked about this in the first phase, and maybe we've just been very lucky, but I think we've only seen benefits from working in a multidisciplinary team. I think like the diversity of perspectives that people coming from the different fields has brought has been really useful. And we've had a lot of really good debates and discussions as a result of the fact that people are coming from different perspectives. I suppose the main challenges with like any multidisciplinary project is kind of finding a common language. But I think that's quite good because it really forces you to step outside your like little subfield and the language and assumptions and norms that you have within that and kind of think about like a broader perspective. Yeah, so it's not a very good answer. I don't think I can think of any challenges, but I can definitely think of benefits.
That's what we like to hear, and very good news. In terms of then not quite the same lens as challenges, but in terms of, this, as we've noted, has been a fairly long process since starting autumn last year, coming up to a year by the end of summer. And I wondered whether you've had any major changes of direction since starting work on this project through the Data Prize.
I think probably the biggest change of direction for us hasn't been so much as regards the tool, but we were quite focused on arts engagement and reading engagement as an active ingredient for the first phase. And our analyses, when we applied counterfactual analysis, basically didn't find there was really evidence for that as an active ingredient. I mean, there's a lot of complexity about it, and that's very specific to the way that reading was operationalized in the data sets that we were using. And I don't think our results are by any means definitive, but that in combination with the fact that our young person advisory group really were telling us that factors like social media use and sleep were really, really what was important to them in terms of their mental health, really made us change our focus in terms of our empirical analyses. And for example, rather than having reading engagement as our illustrative example, as would have probably been our original plan, with the digital tool, we're now pivoting to doing social media use because we think that that's more relevant for young people and might be something that others can connect to a bit better as well.
Really interesting. Thank you. We have a question, more of a comment in the chat, saying from Bonnie, saying, "Hi Aja, thank you for the talk. Do put me on the list for any user testings or trainings you might run. I'd be happy to circulate these." And on that note, I wonder, is there anything else, Aja, in terms of, I know you've got your request for input slides up there, but anything you want to add into the chat, anything further you want to ask of our audience, please go ahead before we head to our break.
So what I'll do is I'll just stick my email address into the chat for anybody who wants to follow up, I'm very grateful for any input, and thank you, Bonnie, for that also.
Fantastic. If there are no other questions, then we can head straight to our break a little bit early. So we'll come back at 1:08, just ahead of 10 past, and wait a bit and start our final presentation of today. Thanks very much, everybody. Speak soon. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'll let people drift back in for a second.
Can I go ahead and share my screen, Michael?
Yes, please do. And in fact, we can get started. I think that's enough time. So our last presentation is about the Harmony tool. And this is going to be presented by Dr. Owen McElroy and Dr. Bettina Mortrecht.
Great. Oh, apologies. It's 1:10 on a Wednesday when there's a fire alarm drill on my campus. I don't know if anybody could hear that. It seems to have stopped. Great. So can you see my screen and everything? Okay, Michael? Yep, great. Okay, I'll properly start now. So hi, everybody. My name is Owen McElroy. I'm from Ulster University in Northern Ireland, and I'm going to be speaking today about our Harmony project. So, as we all know, millions of people across the globe are held back from kind of living kind of life as they should by mental health problems every year. And because of this, researchers have spent decades collecting very valuable data that can help us understand the development of mental ill health and the factors that we need to be targeting to address the growing mental health crisis. So there's lots of data out there. And while these data have helped us improve our understanding of mental illness, there remains the question, and I think Aja mentioned this in her presentation, about are we making the most use of the data that we already have collected and we have access to? And what our project, we argue that being able to link and combine existing data sets is one way we can help advance current mental health research. There's various reasons why we might want to do this. If you're taking data from multiple data sets and combining them, you're improving your statistical power by increasing your sample size. But it also offers us an opportunity to understand how mental health develops in different contexts. So say I'm a researcher based in Europe, and I've done some, run a study, maybe looking at an intervention for depression or anxiety in young people. I then go to a conference, I get talking to another researcher, maybe from South America, find out they've done something quite similar in a similar target population at a similar time. If we bring these data sets together, we've almost got this type of natural experiment, similar characteristics, but in different cultures. So we can use this data to explore the impact of cultural factors and other contexts in the development of mental health. At least in theory, that's the case. In practice, however, most mental health research is conducted in silos. We've got different research teams and different researchers carrying out different studies, and these studies, they obviously by their very nature differ on a lot of features, design methods and things like that. So for instance, when we're assessing mental health problems, usually in large groups, we usually use questionnaires. We have the participants fill out questionnaires. However, over the decades, many different questionnaires have been developed to assess mental health. If we look at something like depression, there are estimates that there are over 200 different questionnaires out there that can be used to measure depression. And these questionnaires can differ quite substantially on things like the number and the types of symptoms that they ask about. So again, back to our example, we've got two studies that are very similar in design, but say they've used two different questionnaires. Maybe the studies we're looking at anxiety in young people. One study has measured anxiety using the GAD-7. Another has measured anxiety in young people using Beck's anxiety inventory. What do we do in this situation? Can we pool these data together, or are we kind of comparing apples and oranges? So to facilitate research collaborations across the globe, we've developed Harmony. Harmony is a free-to-use online tool that's built in Python, and it uses natural language processing. So we hear a lot about this these days with things like ChatGPT. Harmony kind of is built on some of the similar technology. And what it does is, if you feed questionnaire metadata into Harmony, so not actual raw data or people's responses, but actually the content of surveys, What Harmony does is it picks out individual questions or items from 2 or more questionnaire batteries, say two different studies, and points out and gives you an idea of, are there specific subsets of questions that are similar in terms of their content. So for instance, Harmony might flag up these 2 different items in the GAD-7 and Beck's anxiety inventory. The question asking about, are you having trouble relaxing, is quite similar to this question, have you been unable to relax? So it can help us identify what's similar across 2 or more studies and what's different. And if we focus on the things and analyze the questions or the variables that are similar, we can really make the most of our data that we have and look at those kind of cross-cultural or how things evolve and develop in different contexts. Also, there are language barriers that can be prohibitive in this type of research, bringing data together. One of the neat benefits of Harmony is it's a multilingual tool, so it's kind of language agnostic. It can match questionnaire variables across different languages also. So, and the easiest thing to do is probably to show you how Harmony works itself. We've got our QR code here if anybody wants to try it out themselves in their own time. I think Bettina might put the link in the chat. So if you follow that, you should get taken to a website that looks like this. Hopefully everybody can see what I'm seeing. So a very simple drag and drop GUI. If you have, say, questionnaire data on PDFs, so actual the questionnaire content on PDFs, you can simply just drag and drop them into Harmony. You could copy and paste in text format and paste it in there, and Harmony will automatically extract the questionnaire data from your PDF. So let's just look at an example here. So say I am a researcher. I've conducted a study of risk factors for anxiety in young people. My sample, I've administered the ORCAD's revised child and adolescent depression scale to my participants. They've completed that. I've met somebody at a conference who's done a similar sort of study, maybe in the United States. The only difference is that they've used the GAD-7 generalized anxiety disorder scale. So these are kind of preloaded questionnaires, but again, if you had these on PDFs, you can drag and drop them in. I simply bring them into Harmony, check the matches, and you should get something that looks like this. So hopefully, so this is this is a prototype. So you can see what Harmony's done here. It's identified all the questions in the questionnaire. Now the ORCADS is obviously, it's the much bigger questionnaire than the GAD-7. And it's matched up the most similar items or questions based on their content. Harmony rank orders the questions across the 2 instruments, and it provides you an empirical metric of how similar they are. This is the cosine similarity index. Basically, every word in the question is converted to a numerical vector, and they're modeled based on how similar they are. You're given this very easy to understand metric ranging from -1 to +1. Here we've represented it as kind of a percentage, but basically higher scores means a greater level of semantic match. So we can just eyeballing this, we can see there's a lot of similar questions here. Something like, I worry about things versus worrying too much about different things. I feel restless, being so restless that it's hard to sit still. When I have a problem, I feel shaky. Is quite similar to feeling nervous, anxious, and on edge. So if we were to now just conduct our analysis on these subsets of items that Harmony's identified, we could make a more valid comparison across our 2 studies or 2 countries, whatever grouping variable you are using. Again, just to illustrate, if instead of a researcher from another predominantly English-speaking country, say they've done a bit of research, used the GAD-7, a different translation of it, maybe you're working with some researchers in Portugal or Brazil, the GAD-7 Portuguese version, we can simply, again, drag and drop it into Harmony, check our matches, Okay, this is still giving, oh, here's some bugs. It's still giving me the English version. If I were to, oh no, here we go. It's now reset itself. So here you can see we're still getting the same matches, even though the questionnaire is now in Portuguese. So that's a quick whistle stop tour of our tool. Like I said, we'd love for people to try it out themselves. But the project itself, it's not just about developing the tool. We're also looking to put the tool to the test, using it to try and answer a research question. The research question we're interested in is, how does social connection influence the development, or how is it associated with mental health problems in young people from different cultural backgrounds? In this case, we're looking at young people from the United Kingdom and Brazil. So we started off by conducting some PPI, asking young people what social connections meant to them. What did they think of, or what did they consider the most important aspects of different social connections? We brainstormed all of these different factors and came up with a range of things they thought were important. So these were things like, relationships with your peers, relationships with your family members, family dynamics, and stuff like that. So I think we identified around about 15 common 15 items that young people thought were important. We then looked through two large existing data sets, so the Millennium Cohort Study in the UK and the Brazilian High Risk Cohort Study, to see if we could find variables and data that kind of mapped onto these concepts we identified in our PPI. Again, however, these questions were asked in different languages and in slightly different ways in terms of phrasing and stuff like that. So we took all of the data on social connection that we identified and we fed it into Harmony to see, again, are we comparing apples with oranges, or does it look like we've got comparable data across the UK and Brazil? So here's just an example of some of the results we had. We found, again, quite high levels of agreement, even across languages. So for instance, on average, I think we found cosine similarity indices of around between 40 and 80%. Again, the kind of take-home message here is it looks like these two data sets are reasonably similar, or the semantic content of the questions that were asked were similar enough that we can explore cross-cultural differences. And that's something we're currently doing the empirical analysis to. We're using these data and we'll be hopefully reporting on over the next couple of months. So I've only got a few minutes left. What are some of the challenges and reflections from our work so far? So we're kind of, with this method and what we're doing here, we're really in uncharted territories. There's no, we couldn't find anybody else out there who's doing something similar. We've no kind of guidelines, rules of thumb to follow. So some of the problems we ran into were things like the specificity or how sensitive should the tool be, because you can actually change how sensitive Harmony is, how close do you want the matches to be. If you set the specificity at kind of extremely comprehensive or conservative levels, two questions would have to be almost identical to be flagged up as a match. So we're playing around with establishing different thresholds at the minute. We also need to validate the tool using actual empirical data, making Harmony sustainable. So, it's hosted on a server. These things aren't for free every time you run something on it. You're using a bit of computational power. There's costs with this. How do we ensure that over the future? How do we make it, I guess, as efficient as possible? Those are the types of things we've been looking into, and also, how do we address cultural considerations? At the end of the day, most of the questionnaires we deal with are based on kind of Western conceptualizations of what mental health is. So we're trying to test with collaboration with other research groups from around the world how culturally sensitive Harmony can be. Going forward, we're working hard in the background to improve the front end of the tool. So what you saw today was very much a very basic prototype. We're co-designing a new front end along with researchers. So this, for instance, is an example of a workshop we ran on Monday in Belfast. with researchers from backgrounds in psychology and computer science, where we kind of constructed a user story and went through some design features and things like that. We're also looking to validate the tool. Again, we've got 2 papers we'll be working on, looking at how Harmony matches up with kind of human expert opinion harmonization and also quantitative data. So how does Harmony compare to things like factor analysis and stuff like that? And obviously going forward, we're looking to continue to partner up with like-minded initiatives. So for instance, we've had a tremendous amount of support from Louise Arsenault and the Catalogue of Mental Health project that Louise and her team at King's run. So those are things that we're continuing to explore, and hopefully we can integrate our tool with other platforms. Again, now it's my turn. I'm last to this part of the presentation. My turn to kind of plug our participation or recruitment. If anybody is interested in this, we'll be running some online workshops. People can get a £10 Amazon voucher for their time, again, depending on how many people are interested. So what we've got here is a QR code to a kind of expression of interest form. If you would be interested in coming along to one of these, please follow this link and we'll be in touch with further details. I think that's everything from me. I think I might be 30 seconds over, apologies. But yeah, thank you for listening.
No problem at all, Aaron. Thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation and demonstration as well. We already have a couple of questions in from Bonnie. So her first question is, what are you using to translate between languages? And have you considered the possibility of creating special dictionaries that use subject-specific synonyms for translation?
Okay, I will try. I'll maybe get Thomas Wood. Thomas, are you on the call? So Thomas is our data scientist who is the expert in the actual models and how they do the translation. Thomas, I might, if you're there, throw the issue of translation over to you.
If not, I can say something. So currently we're using actually like professional translation services.
Sorry for the delay.
Okay. Do you want to go, Thomas?
Yeah. Sorry. Please repeat the question. Sorry.
What we're using to translate, to do the translation between the languages, and how whether we are going to develop a dictionary that reflects different sort of cultural concepts that might not be sort of present in other countries or languages.
I think so. We're using transformer models, which are based kind of they're language agnostic. So we don't need to actually add in translation at any stage. And so how we're validating it is taking known harmonizations between languages like the English and Portuguese GAD-7 or English and Portuguese questionnaires and instruments. And we're testing that it actually does perform the harmonization in agreement with human annotators. So there isn't actually any translation going on under the hood. It's just matching text in one language to text in another directly without needing to do that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, then I might just add to the cultural bids. So we have started to sort of contact different research teams that are based in other countries to figure out what could these words mean. I think we haven't quite found a solution yet how to tackle it in terms of how would we translate concepts that are not really present in another language, but we are considering to run roundtables in the next phase to kind of explore that more, to get researchers from many different countries together and then think with them together how we could do that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Bettina. And a follow-on question from Bonnie, which is, can you have a many-to-one question matching between surveys?
Yeah, so that's in our initial prototype version, that wasn't possible, but that is something we're developing right now and should be available in kind of the next version of Harmony. It's come with some challenges in terms of how do you visualize those aspects, because obviously if you've got two questionnaires with 15, 20 items each and you're matching everything to everything, it becomes quite but we're testing different ways of visualizing that kind of in clusters and things like that. So yeah, that short answer, that feature will be coming.
Fantastic, exciting news. I'll also welcome, as well as further questions from our audience, if any of our other panelists or presenters want to ask any questions, please do put your hand up. But while you're thinking about that, I might ask the same question that I asked Aja, which is thinking forwards by 5 years, where do you sort of see your tool and the impact in an ideal world?
So I think
Bettina, shall I go? Do you want to go to Tom? Yeah.
So I think ideally we want to sort of work it into existing structures, because when you look at digital tools, the main thing for them to survive is if you look at how can you implement them into what exists already. And going from there, I always see especially the global aspect as one of the biggest sort of selling points, or the most sort of beneficial points of the whole tool. So I think ideally we would like to not only harmonize things from a sort of, you know, semantic or data level, but really to reflect sort of contextual kind of factors as well. So how do countries differ structurally or from a society perspective on a broader scale, so that we can actually not only kind of compare data, but also make interpretation of the data easier for researchers to do, or just a bit more comprehensive. And that we just use this as a starting point to connect people, mental health research really across the globe. So that's where I would see it.
Fantastic.
Big dreams.
Thank you. Rightly so, rightly so. And a second thing to ask, I suppose, is all of the teams on the Wellcome Mental Health Data Prize are multidisciplinary teams, and yours is no exception, but you're also sort of working in a cross-cultural context with different languages, as well as different time zones and different cultures. I wondered if you could sort of reflect on that mix of experiences, both professionally and culturally, and whether that's been challenging, or whether that's benefits and challenges, I suppose, of having such a mixed team.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't, but like as you were saying, the challenges, I don't think we've faced anything that was too problematic. So I guess for us, so our collaborator who couldn't be here today, Mauricio Hoffman from Brazil, you know, his background would be psychiatry, so you know there was a lot of overlap there. So I guess in some instances, the greatest challenge, and I think it's one that we've overcome very well and learned an awful lot doing, was you know, across disciplines rather than across countries. So for instance, Thomas, who's been leading all of the technical aspects of this. Thomas's background is in kind of expert in machine learning and data science. So I think, Thomas, this is was one of your main kind of our first forays into kind of mental health. So you know, we had to early in the project kind of make sure Thomas learned about what we do and the types of research, the data we use, the types of research questions, and then vice versa. You know, Thomas dealing with some very complicated AI models and stuff like that, and Thomas has done a fantastic job kind of making that accessible for us as well. So I think those are could have been potential challenges, but I think we've all learned quite a bit, and it's been a really good process so far.
Fantastic. And once again, great news to hear that things have been interesting and eye-opening, and mostly smooth sailing as well. Before we head to our wrap-up then, I wonder where should people go if they have any questions for your team? And also, are there any other asks that you want to make of the audience here today?
So we have our app. We also have a website, harmonydata.org. So that's where you can find a link to the actual tool, where you can find out about kind of developments. We've got some blog posts written there and things like that, and also all of the usual social media platforms. You should be able to find us. We also have a contact us feature on the website if anybody wants to get in touch. And yeah, we're always either through our own Twitters and things like that. Would be happy to hear from people, or else through the Harmony Twitter, whatever. However, you know, we're easily found.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Owen, Bettina, and Thomas, for a really interesting presentation. And that takes us to our wrap up. So I'm quickly going to share my screen. There we go. And I'm hoping that that looks like a PowerPoint. Yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists and presenters today. We had Alex and Amelia, as well as Heather. We had Aja, and we also had Owen, Bettina, and Thomas as well. Thank you all for taking us through your tools and spending some time to sort of talk through where things are in a very exciting piece of work, despite many other things that I'm sure you have to do, as well as showing and telling to the world. But also thank you to all of our audience today, anybody who's joined and asked questions. It's been fantastic to get so much engagement as well. If you have any final questions, please pop them in the chat. This could be for any team or for the organisers in general, perhaps for all teams. And we are going to drop our email addresses, so Social Finance's Data Prize email address, in the chat as well. We'd also be grateful for any feedback on today's session. So we have a link which we're going to drop in the chat to a very brief, I think 3-question feedback survey. You can also use the QR code here to fill that out, just so we can improve the way we run events like this in the future. And the last thing to say is that we have a second day of this tomorrow. We'll be hearing for our 2 remaining teams. So it starts again at 12, just like today. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Jolyon Miles Wilson at Black Thrive Global with a presentation called Liberating Data, Our Progress on Bringing Stop and Search Insights to Communities. And then we will also be hearing from a team led by Dr. Jeremy Segret at Cardiff University, entitled Understanding the Role of Secondary School Environments and Policies and Drivers of School Connectedness to Prevent Anxiety and Depression. So following on both of these from many of the things brought today, and we hope that all of you here today will be able to join us again for that one. Again, this will also be recorded and we will be circulating that. So I will stop sharing my screen and just check if there are any final questions. I don't believe so. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we hope to see as many of you soon tomorrow. Otherwise, have a good day.
Thanks.